Leadership without accountability cannot be effective. You can only hold yourself accountable for goals that others know about. Tell someone who you value, who you trust, what your leadership goal for this month, for this year, for the next quarter, and raise your accountability. Research has shown that when you share your goal with one person, 2 people, 3 people, in a space of safety, so they can hold you up to that commitment, chances are you will grow through the process and you will achieve those goals. So let's go deeply into understanding what you need to be accountable for. Now, there are a couple of bad habits that many of us have as leaders. And these bad habits have been fueled by globalization, by technology, and by the fact that we are not very clear where the boundaries should be. So let me talk about a number of those 12 bad habits that you need to think about so that ultimately you can ensure that you become the kind of leader you need to be. The first one is impulsive web browsing. Yeah, what they call strolling through the internet. Multitasking as the second one. A lot of research has shown that the inability to focus is one of the biggest challenges of our generation. Actively checking email. I'll give you a little tip here that when it comes to email, choose when to check it. Keep blocks of time where you check email, finish off with it, and then go on to the next task. Moral licensing. What's that? Interesting, yeah? Moral licensing. It means that you have chosen to follow through on a goal. And because you've chosen to follow through on a goal, you allow yourself some cheating. You say, you know what? I've met this deadline, so I can, let's give you an example. I can eat something that is not healthy for me because I'm rewarding myself. Incidentally, that kind of moral licensing actually detracts from the benefits you have gotten of achieving that goal so far. The fifth one is putting off your most important task to later in the day. If you can choose to do the one that is hardest, most important, first thing in the day, when you are full of energy and focus, that is the wiser thing to do. Taking too many meetings. It looks like in this day and age, it's actually exciting to be extremely busy. That when someone asks to see you, you're like swiping through your diary and saying, my next slot is May 2017. There's no pride in being too overly committed. Check how many meetings you're taking in a day, bearing in mind that there are many eventualities that you have no idea could cross your path as the day wears on. Sitting out all day. Many of us are knowledge workers. You sit on your seat in the bank, you serve customers, you never stand up, you never take the stairs, you never rise up. There's something about sitting all day that has an impact on your physical well-being. You remember we talked about well-being? Medical doctors are saying every 1.5 hours, take a few minutes to stand up, stretch, and then go back to your seat. It improves blood circulation, it circulates that energy into your head, so you're more productive. So the old fallacy that if you sit for 6 hours doing some hard, intense work, chances are you're not productive. Hitting the snooze button. This morning, what did you do? Did you press snooze? Let me give you a tip. When you press snooze in the morning, you have actually lost the first battle of the day. So I encourage you to start thinking about waking up as a heroic minute, a minute to be heroic. Put the phone, if it's your phone that is an alarm, far away from you. So you have to get out of bed, walk there, and switch it off. When you conquer yourself in the morning, in the first instance of the day, chances are you can conquer yourself, as Aristotle said, in many other instances throughout the day. Failing to prioritize. Remember the values assessment? Prioritize your work and your time and your life's commitments around your values. Over-planning, over-analyzing. There's something called analysis paralysis. You overthink and you overthink until you're paralyzed from any action. But the flip side of under-planning, and here I encourage you, plan your tomorrow today. One wise mentor once told me, plan for your retirement the minute you sign the contract. Have you planned for that? And lastly, using your phone in bed. Research is also showing us that people have chosen to look at their phones as if it's another part of their body. The phone is not. Somehow we lived very well without the phone. So put boundaries around the phone because one, when you look at your phone in bed, what does it do? The first thing it does is it distracts your mind because the screen is the kind of screen that does what? That reactivates neurons in your mind. And once you do that, the inability to fall asleep and be truly restful is negated. So choose when to look at your phone and choose when not to look at it. So those are 12 habits that many of us have been carrying around with us. But maybe it's time for us to rise ourselves. And I want to introduce you to some part of my doctoral research, a leadership accountability circle. 10 people you ought to be having in your life as you navigate the rough terrains of leadership and learning. Who are those 10 people? The first one is a mentor. A mentor can also be seen as a tour guide, one who has walked the path before you. A mentor wants to share with you mistakes they've made and lessons they've learned. And I encourage you, have a mentor in the 5 areas of well-being that we talked about before. A coach, and I urge you to get an accredited coach. And a coach who can help you by challenging you. And what a coach does is they ask you hard questions that many times you already know the answers. So a coach looks at the interaction with their client on the premise that you already have the answers. All the coach needs to do is to draw them out of you and hold you accountable to following them through. Spiritual director. We talked about spiritual well-being and that leadership is a very spiritual thing. A spiritual director is someone who you trust, who you can talk about the aspects that are impacting on your soul. Reverse mentor. Many of us have reverse mentors around us. Sometimes maybe they're your children, your nieces, your nephews, or those young millennials or digital natives that you're constantly trying to push to become like us. They don't need to. Reverse mentors are people who will share with you insights that you have no idea about. How many of you have a Twitter account? What kind of tweets are you sending? Do you have someone young who's able to coach you on how to actually manage your brand through social media? That's a reverse mentor. Therapist or a counselor. By the time you're a manager or a leader, chances are you've gone through some trauma or you will go through some trauma. Unfortunately, there's something called the burden of leadership that is only heightened when you have trauma or unresolved issues that have permeated your life in the past. I encourage you, whether it's in your personal life, marriage, whether you've lost someone, to have a therapist or a counselor who you can go and speak about those particular aspects that you're struggling with, that you have had a challenge of putting them down, those burdens that are carrying and carried through and through that are impacting on your ability to lead. A therapist. The 7th, a doctor. I talked about physical well-being. You need to ensure that you have a doctor who you can talk to about medical history. What if your family is predisposed to diabetes or high blood pressure? Then if your doctor knows that, then they will tell you, this kind of career, you need to manage it better because the levels of stress are going to trigger the idea of being highly hypertensive. So when you have a doctor who understands your history, they can also guide your future. Traveling companions, 2, 3 close friends who you know you can walk the journey of life. How do you tell whether someone is a traveling companion? It's a kind of friend who, if you had an emergency late in the night and you call them, they would pick your phone and actually come to where you are. Many of us are honored, privileged, gifted to have 1, 2, or 3. Take care of those traveling companions. If you're married, your spouse ought to be one of them. Your sisters, your friends, it depends, but choose them wisely. The 9th one is a leadership sponsor. What's a leadership sponsor? That is someone who has access to power, influence, networks that you have no access to. And because they have access to those and they see your talent, then they raise you by connecting you to that power. A leadership sponsor sees your excellent work and says, so-and-so could actually be very good for that role. So they speak about you in networks that you have no access to. Now the thing with a leadership sponsor is you also have to ensure that your brand is retained up there. Meaning that if they recommend you to do a specific kind of assignment, a specific kind of network access, that you go there and ensure that you deliver on the work that you need to deliver on. And lastly, outer circle associations. If you're a banker, you ought to have peers who are not bankers. Because in so doing, what happens is that you begin to understand different viewpoints. And in leadership, it is critical that you understand different viewpoints. So those are 10 members of the LAC 10. How many do you have? Surround yourself with people that force you to do better. That's what the LAC 10 will do.